I think education is one area, a service, or product that you can't afford to cut corners because it is actually going to be affecting the life of a child inside your school. Let's say edupreneurs who want to start
Mhm.
schools, right? I think there I would certainly say, please get into it only if you love this space. Don't do it purely because you feel that it is another business line that can get you X amount of ROI for your investments.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of SELINTalks, podcast initiative by Selin Club, where we explore and gain insights with some of the leading voices in the education sector globally. For those who are new here, Selin Club is a global network for educators and education leaders, where collaboration is the magic. Today, we are joined here by a truly accomplished guest, Mr. Vinesh Menon. He is currently the CEO of Human Development and Social Impact Solution at Ampersand Group, where he has spent the last 6 years driving a positive change in the education sector. With the professional journey spanning over 27 years across various industries, including education, BFSI, KPO, and FMCG. Vinesh has held numerous G suite positions and excelled in sales, business management, operations, and channel management. Over the last 9 years, he has become a subject matter expert in all the aspects of K 12 ecosystem, making a significant impact on the education sector. We're thrilled to have him on the show today. Let's welcome Mr. Vinesh Menon. Okay, first of all, welcome to Selling Talks. First and foremost, for my audience, I would like to ask about your journey, about your, how did you get into education sector altogether, and what kept you going into it, first of all.
So thank you for having me here. And yeah, interesting journey because I've been actually part of the uh, BFSI, or the banking and financial service world, for a long time. Prior to which I was with the FMCG side. So getting into education is a completely different route if you really compare to what I was doing earlier. This happened almost a decade back when I think I suddenly realized that the banking products and all that we were doing in the financial services was starting to get a little, let's say, it was not giving me the kind of happiness that I really was looking for in terms of contributing to mankind or humankind. And financial services are starting to get a little commoditized, and that's also the period when the Indian education sector was at its throes of going in for a big growth. I mean, look at
Right.
the ecosystem. Nearly 1.5 million schools and 260 million students, and it was actually at the beginning of a revolution of sorts. The next generation was picking up, and there's a lot happening in that space. So I felt, let me give it a shot, jump into that space and see what I can contribute in that area with all the experience that I picked up earlier. So that is my beginning in the education space. And I was also completed by saying that there are a few folks whom I knew from the financial sector who had decided to jump into the education space, and who I teamed up with to try and create a little school chain across the country. So that was my first tryst with education.
Right. And what kept you going towards, in this entire sector?
Oh, the sheer fact that something new happens every day and there's no monotony. I think it's a constant, full, fast-tracked change that happens almost every now and then. As we sit and talk now, we have no idea what's going to happen in the next probably 3 months. So there's a
Yeah.
lot that's happening in the space, a lot of innovation, lot of lot of areas that one needs to work and improve upon. So I think, honestly, and even if you really look at the ecosystem, it is not just education and schooling in one domain. You have schooling in private domain, you have schooling in the public domain, you've got skill education, your livelihood, you've got adult education. It's a chain of services that are there, which are all interconnected, and I think that keeps one always hungry to try and look for more, and to do more.
Right. You have also established K-12 schools in from the scratch, I must mention, in tier three and four cities. Can you share some of the unique challenges that you face and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so first of all, there was a very interesting period in my early age, early life in the education sector. And when we talk about tier three and tier four, we're talking about really interior parts of the country, right? There
Yeah.
are places like Malsian and Rampura Fool, which are nearly 100 kilometers and 50 kilometers from places like Jalandhar and Bathinda, which are themselves fairly in the interior of the country. Naturally, the challenges there are largely to do with the aspirations of the folks there, right? The community out there has started to aspire for better education for their children, but the price points don't really match. So they want school buildings which are absolutely state of the art, but they
Yeah.
won't be able to afford the kind of fee that one charges in the urban sector. So that is a bit of a challenge. The other challenge was to do with the academic delivery itself. I mean, we were getting into starting schools which started to bring about a bit of a revolution in the way education is delivered. We wanted to try and get into experiential learning, try and give learning processes that are slightly different from the traditional rote learning mechanism. And the parents out there wouldn't really understand that in the beginning. So they were
Yeah.
wanting their children to try and probably do the kind of things that other children are doing in other schools. So to get that little shift in mindset became a bit of a challenge. And the third challenge was with respect to the model of the schooling itself, in the sense, in tier two and tier three and tier four, the kind of schools that we started was in association with local asset partners. It was an asset light model. So the local partners would invest into the infrastructure, and we would bring in the entire know-how and technology and the brand of the school. Now, to get the local asset partner to understand this and to try and align to a certain, let's say, standardized process that we wanted to adopt was a bit of a challenge. And these were all good learnings, but these were unique challenges. How did I overcome them? Uh, to a large extent, none of them are irrational, right? All it requires is for you to really sit down and invest your time and energy in trying to make them explain and understand what you're attempting to do. And so long as ultimately the objective is to take care of the needs of a child and the need of a student, most of the other parameters fall in place. The parents seem to understand, the partners, asset partners seem to understand, and of course, once that happens, then you start to progress. But it did involve a lot of talking, a lot of discussions, yeah, with these stakeholders.
Right. There was a lot of, I think, the child-centric, children-centric approach towards your solutions of these problems.
It has to be. Education is all about the child. Ultimately, you can't get confused, and you got to remain focused. Your ultimate customer is the child and the progress of the child, because you are somewhere being responsible for the direction and journey of a child from a very young age to when he becomes a teenager, and shape him up for, let's say, adult life. So ultimately, it all has to just focus around the child.
Right, very, very true. Early childhood education and care have increasingly gained a lot of importance in the recent years. There are a lot of talks about early childhood development, early childhood care. Lot of different agendas and forums are being built up on that. In your view, what would be the critical elements to define the high quality early childhood care and education?
I think first of all, we must understand that this is a very, very important topic. Early child education is very, very important, especially when you have the basic brain architecture of a child getting created. There are studies that show that a child who does not go through that initial, uh, years of proper guidance, vis-a-vis a child who does go through. I think when they both get into the primary and the pre-primary sections, there is a difference in the two cohorts of children. So I think early child education is very, very critical, and largely because the ages from 6 months to 7 years, actually from 0 to 7, is the period when the brain develops the fastest. In scientific terms, there is something called synapses, which are connections between our neurons, and the synapses grow at a very rapid pace in the early years. It's almost 1 million synapses a second, and I
Wow.
think they also say that you almost have about 15,000 synapses per neuron in the early ages, and as we grow into adulthood, all this starts to shrink. So this is the period when the child is absorbing the maximum, and during that period, if you do not give the child the right guidance and the right ingredients to try and soak in, it can be detrimental as the child grows. So early education to that extent is very critical. Now, therefore, what is quality education? Look, I'm not an academician, so I don't want to really delve into the academic inputs, which there are many professional,
Right.
well qualified academicians who can give this answer. But I do know that eventually, all your ingredients of education, which are either to do with your identity, to do with your cognitive skills, to do with how you get your shapes and sizes in place. Uh, all this has to be exciting for the child. It has to be stimulating. And to make it stimulating and exciting, the teacher and the child inside the classroom and the teacher parent child nexus has to be very strong. And that is where experiential learning, exciting learning, having a good blend of imagery as well as physical tangible items, using technology just to the right extent. I would want to make an emphasis here that technology cannot be your starting point of teaching a preschooling child, because there are even stories of how a child forgets to open a book and touch pages because he or she is able to get more attracted to the digital world. So I think the right
Yeah.
blend of both is very important. But as far as the quality of pedagogy is concerned, there are many methods of doing it. Reggio Emilia, Montessori. You have got various types of teaching. Whether it is inquiry based, reflective, collaborative. And that's an area I don't want to get into because academicians would do a much better job. But I do know that every child from the age of 6 months to 6 years must go through a period where they are able to also get into being with other children, working on the socio emotional skills,
Yeah.
and start to understand that this is the world that's going to be shaping up as they grow. And that's that. As long as you get that outcome, I think it's quality education going in. The other part of early child education is the early child care. And this is especially important when it comes to government preschools like Anganwadis and Balwadis. The right amount of nutrition, ensuring that the calories that are required for the child is in place, checking the height and weight in time. So early child care to do with all this, early child education to do with the quality of education I just mentioned about. The combination I think is very important for preschool children to soak in as they grow.
Right. In my conversations like these, I have come across a lot of, like you said, academic people are talking about it. There are different ways of teaching methods and all of those things taking place. What, according to you, is being missed as a method or an awareness thing that is being missed right now and should be covered in these topics or any type of discussion that happens around early childhood care more than education?
So I'll answer this in two parts. One is what is missing in a typical preschool. I think we're getting better. I don't think too much is getting missed out there, so long as the teacher is not getting structured into a certain process which has been predefined. So 9 o'clock I come in, 9 to 10 I have to do this, 10 to 11 I have to do this, 11 to 12 I have to do this, and 1 o'clock I have to leave. I know you can't get down to that kind of a structure when it comes to preschool children. And therefore I think to try and make it individualistic is very important because no two little children are the same, and therefore patience and not getting defined by a structure is very important. So to have a teacher being able to be flexible and move around different structures depending on the kind of child in front of you, that I think is very important. And I'm not saying that's missing today, but it could get more standardized. Today there is no standardization in some form. I mean, preschools can emerge in every nook and corner of the country without too much of
Yeah.
regulatory interventions, and that then raises questions about whether a good standard of education is being given. And there are great chains and brands which are out there. There are no doubts about what they do, but what about that one-off standalone preschool that comes out? What really happens there is something that's probably an area one needs to look into. The second area which I would think is missing or needs to be given more attention is the preschool education for children belonging to the economically weaker sections. So let's take labor, the laborers of this country, the construction workers. Construction workers mostly dwell in residences or dwell in areas which are very close to project construction sites. Now, many of these
Mm.
places do not have anganwadis. They do not have balwadis. They do not have preschools. One often tends to see little children of 1 year and 2 years of these construction laborers playing in the sand, playing in the stones, and not really getting the kind of early education that they should. I think there should be a very conscious effort to between the government and the private industry to try and work out some kind of a model together to bring in daycare centers or creches in these areas so that children of construction laborers get their due education in the early years. I think these
Yeah.
are some of the areas that one needs to probably bring more attention to.
Right. A lot of a lot of schools, K-12 schools, do have that underprivileged programs for kids after school, after hours, and the teachers also volunteer to uh, give the education, deliver the content, and actually help out these kids. I don't think we have anything for preschools, like you said. What should be done if somebody is interested in doing that? If a preschool, if let's just say a standalone preschool, want to give it to the society and help these construction workers kids into it, what should be like a step one? Or is there a blueprint print in your head that they should be doing these things to actually help the society in this manner?
So, like you said, it's not as if they don't do it. Volunteering does happen. My
Yeah.
intent is to try and bring in more scale and amplify it in a larger, in a larger manner. So there is a preschool which is mushroomed in a certain place, and the preschool sees a construction happening in your surroundings, and you adopt those children. Nothing like it. That's very noble of them. But I think it's important to try and make this into a bigger process across the country, because this country is so diverse and it's got so many laborers and children that we need to do
Yeah.
it in a far more structured manner, which means that the government should try and bring in a certain amount of regulatory requirement around this area, work on better public-private partnership models. I mean, they have the infrastructure, the private enterprises have the resources and the means to do it. They should get together and do that. But as a step one, I think if a preschool wants to do it, you just have to have the inclination. I mean, that's all you need to do. You just have to probably go and do your little bit in the neighborhood. The other point I can make out, I can probably share is that if you do something like this, try and talk about it. Don't
Yeah.
keep it silent. Let others get to know that you're doing this. At this juncture, I would like to just mention in a side that there is a platform called Nexus of Good. And Nexus of Good is a platform that amplifies all the good things that are happening in this country, which nobody knows about, right? Because these are
Wow.
typically not highlighted in media as much as the negative stuff, because media loves to really highlight all the negative stuff to a large
Yeah.
extent. The Nexus of Good highlights all the good stuff that is happening in this country, especially in the areas of health, education, healthcare, etc. And probably one step could be to, if you do something like this, reach out to Nexus of Good and post your story there, and
Okay.
that story can start going viral, and then maybe it can just pick up, become a best practice for someone else to do it in some other part of the country.
Wow. I have not heard about this platform. For sure, want to check it out. Nexus for Good, is it?
Nexusofgood, Nexus of Good. It is started by founded by an ex bureaucrat, the ex Education Secretary of India, and a
Wow.
gentleman called Anil Swarup, and he's doing a yeoman service to try and bring about this, let's say, this change in people's mindsets through such stories and platforms that can be shared.
Yeah. I think it's the need of the hour also to actually let people know there is also good happening in this country.
Yes, absolutely, and there's a lot of good. If you really open the Nexus of Good and go through the stories, you will see the kind of things that are happening in this country which very few people know about, and
Yeah.
that is what is required.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to go through it and I'm going to mention this for my viewers also. It's important more than
Sure.
anything else. Yeah. So how can parents and caregivers, I'm talking about people like you said that there are underprivileged people who are going through and not getting the right education from the very beginning, especially when it's required. There is a shift of mindset that happens. Like you said, you were building schools in tier 3 and tier 4 cities. What I'm trying to ask here is, there is a mindset that involves from the parent side and that needs to change, right? There are few people who are okay with education, even if they are from, I mean, obviously, if they are from underprivileged background, it becomes a little more difficult to make them understand. I'm talking about the parents and the caregivers to make them understand that this is important. How would a person, so for example, if I'm wanting to start a school for, and there are a lot of schools that I know who are working for underprivileged kids, they are wanting to get more kids to give them more education. What should be the mindset change shift that needs to be done, and how should one actually go about it? You did it with other students, you did it in those areas, you told, I mean, obviously there was a mindset that happens in with the parents as well. How did you do it, and how should one do it?
No, so let me try and break this into two thought processes. One is you mentioned about underprivileged or the economically weaker sections of society and
Yeah.
their uh, acceptance of education for their children. Now, let me tell
Right.
you in no uncertain terms that there is no exception. They're all keen that the children get educated. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so to make them to get the feeling or the perception that these parents do not want education for their children is a myth. They all want the
Okay.
children to do far, far better than what they have done,
Of
and they are
course.
quite open for the children to actually get educated. The problem lies in the access, and therefore, where do you send those kids? How do you do it? And that is one challenge. The second challenge is what is the education quality that comes, that is there in the schools. Now, as much as the government wants to do it, there are some challenges that come there. So, I'll give one simple challenge would be the disproportionate number of teachers to students in schools. There are many schools where there are about more than 50 to 100 children and only two teachers. There are many schools where there are 20 teachers and 50 teachers and only two children, right? So there's a lot of imbalance out here. There are schools where there's infrastructure that is missing. The whole building looks dilapidated. So there
Yeah.
is a certain amount of mindset to send the children there. There are schools where you're still not been able to progress beyond basic chalk and board, whereas a lot of other schools are starting to move into technology and starting to bring digital devices into their classrooms. So that can lead to digital divides. So I think the real issue is not convincing the parents to send their child to school. It is about how we should try and improve the education facilities in this country for the children of such folks. And that can
Right.
be done by starting to work in the existing schools. I mean, don't forget there are 1.5 million schools. 80 to 90% of them are government schools. And that's a lot of schools in this country. And that needs to be improved. Now, that improvement can be done through the right budget allocation by any government towards education. I mean, we've been talking about a 6% of the allocation to education, and it's not yet happened. It's still hovering around 4.5. We're talking about bettering bandwidth at a faster pace wherever schools are. We're talking about making digital devices more affordable. We're talking about increasing the public-private partnership models between industry, academia, and the government, right? Where the
Yeah.
beneficiaries are the children of government. So these are the areas that one needs to focus. What I mentioned about convincing parents is really more to do with the kind of education and the kind of pedagogy that is given, and that is really to do with private schools, because there is a shift happening between what you see in the private schools in the urban and the metros versus the private schools that's happening in the interiors of the country. A lot of the
Mm-hmm.
schools inside the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, where earlier there were convent schools and there were government schools, but very few private schools, and that's starting to now go up. And when that goes up and the teacher attempts to bring in a certain difference in the education process, some conviction needs to be done to the parents to make them understand that. Because ultimately, don't forget, we still are living in a country where, as you move to grade 8 and grade 9 and grade 10, marks start becoming your defining moment. So,
Yeah.
if you've got institutions, higher education institutions, and I don't want to name them, which brings in cutoff marks at 100 and 99, then naturally that becomes your stress point. That is what one has to change. And hopefully, the new education policy 2020 is going to bring in that change. It's going to take a while to implement it, but it is going to try and address some of these basic issues. So I might have drifted from your original question, but
That's fine.
in short, the parent convincing the parent is not the issue. I'm just trying to address that point.
Yeah.
They're fully entrenched into what is required. It is just that they have to go through that motion along with the teacher and understand the changing dynamics of what's happening in this ecosystem. And for that, I think your communication is the most important.
Right. Like we were talking about, marks and all of these things. They start becoming very, very important somehow, and then the whole stress takes into place and everything. Do you think it has a lot to do with how back when we were given early childhood education, it has a lot to do with that we are stressed about marks, the way we have been grown up towards looking at school performances, academics, and all of that. And now it has made a shift. Obviously, there are different ways of teaching methods. There are different ways of content delivery. There are a lot of things. But the kids who did suffer all of that, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th ka stress is a lot to do with how we were given early childhood education.
Not just early childhood education, the way we were all given education. And we were all in a very competitive environment all the time. Marks became the most critical ways to differentiate between the one that stood first in class versus the one that is probably ranked at 40th and 50th. The one that has stood first in class always gets the accolades, they get the applauses. The others are told to emulate him. The his or her parent gets shabashi. The other parent gets a lot of tough talk. So these are early stages of bringing in diffidence into a child, which is not very healthy. But it's like you said, it has started to change, and I advise the readers to also try and go through this link which talks about changing paradigms in education by Sir Ken Robinson. If one reads, one opens this link, you will notice a lovely, 11-minute video clip as to how the earlier form of education was really designed for the Industrial Revolution, and for that it was a very different kind of a period those days, and therefore the entire system was batch driven by what is called a factory kind of education system.
Yeah,
You put batches. So your a batch of 50 would be treated in the same manner. Whereas as you go forward, it's all getting different because each child is different. And that's how the whole word called personalized education, experiential education, contextual education, all is starting to come forth. So academics versus non-academics. Someone who's not very inclined to understand math need not be a
hmm,
bad student. He or she might be good in something else, right? And that is the changing paradigm that is happening. And fortunately, I think the globalization, the connectivity, India's progress is all contributing to that. And
yeah,
like Dr. Mohandas Pai, ex Infosys leader, he had once mentioned that the future, you know, the future readiness of a child is not in trying to absorb the knowledge, or rather, no, not in trying to learn the knowledge, because knowledge is there everywhere. I think the greater, what do you call, the greater talent would be to know how to apply that knowledge and to articulate
right.
that knowledge and how to talk and how to explain oneself. That is the changing paradigm. So your confidence building measures are what is more important than just to be able to rote learn why an earthquake happens, or why is the sun going through its motions, or why is the moon waxing and waning. So that is the change that needs to be brought in.
Very, very true. I think all of the things that we learned in our school, trigonometry never played a role now. So yeah, it's more about
Yeah,
actually,
no one's fault really. I mean, I think we're all
yeah, I
going through
mean,
an evolution. But yeah, but
yeah,
if you are sitting in a classroom today and you were to see triangles and rectangles and squares dancing around you in a 3D image and fighting with each other and then fitting in, you'll feel far more excited, right, than to see it
yeah,
just on the board. That is the
yeah,
difference. That is the
yeah.
difference.
I have a question for you that what would be your suggestion or advice for people who are aspiring to be educators or are young educators who are aspiring to continue this as their career path?
No, look, this is a very broad-based question, because educators, if you're talking about what is my advice to educators who are going to be teaching inside classrooms, I don't think I want to take on that role, because they will get far more advice from the leading qualified academicians. But I would definitely say one point to anyone who wants to get into this industry or into the sector, let's say edupreneurs who want to start
Mhm.
schools, right? I think there I would certainly say, please get into it only if you love this space. Don't do it purely because you feel that it is another business line that can get you X amount of ROI for your investments. Do
Yeah.
it if you love it. Do not cut corners. I think education is one area, a service or product that you can't afford to cut corners because it is actually going to be affecting the life of a child inside a school. Do not start a school because you have a real estate. I think it's important that you do your surveys and find out if there is a reason to have a school in a certain place, and check if you have a real estate then after that, not the other way around,
Yeah.
right? And then also realize that today's age is not about just having a fancy building and a good principal. Far more things need to be done, right? From the way you have your pedagogical processes, your school supply systems, your transportation systems, your administration, your parent management, the ability to know what is your net enrollment, and not just look at admissions. You should also, while the front door takes care of admissions, the back door could be having your children going out. You got to
Yeah.
start. So these are some of the areas that one needs to know before getting into the space. But I think once you get into the space and you really give yourself into it, I think there is a lot that one can contribute to tomorrow's generation.
Yeah, I really like the point that you mentioned that a lot of people are trying to promote admissions. Obviously, everybody wants admissions, and people do not focus on the children that are actually exiting. So I think that makes a lot of sense from the conversations. Obviously, also, what is the social? What is one social cause that you're completely supporting these days, and why? Any
Well,
social cause?
what I'm doing is already quite, it's really in the realm of social impact.
Yeah,
The organization that I represent, we are attempting to. So one, we of course do a lot of work in the private domain. We run schools, so that's one part of it. But we are also working heavily in the public domain. We work with the government, and we work to try and see how we can bring in a change in the realm of education, livelihood, and skill development. And we might soon get into healthcare. Now, all this, I think, are areas that leads to improving the human development index of any state
yeah,
or country, and these are all part of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
right,
So,
right.
I think if you ask me to answer in one line, I would think I'm trying to really work towards nation building by improving the human development index of that particular nation, which is broken up, of course, into states. And uh, the objective is to see, and whatever we are doing is probably a minuscule percentage of the larger ecosystem because of the kind of country that we're in. But so long as I'm able to see a tribal school get improved, so long as I'm able to see astronomy labs being put into government schools, so long as I'm able to see, a lab tomorrow coming for electric vehicles to teach children about what that is, for the future. So long as I see textbooks getting slowly replaced by tablets, so that learning can become more interesting for children. I think these are all areas which, in some form,
Yeah.
are impact areas, and I have my hands full with that.
Wow. Very nicely explained, actually. The entire, impact of this is bigger. You said it's a very small part, but I think it's for the greater good.
It is, I'm sure.
Yeah. Last but not the least, I would like to know your book recommendation because you've mentioned few things, and I would like to know more. Like, which book would you recommend first to the people who are trying to get into this domain, and second, what books did actually help you keep going, or kind of inspired you, something like that.
Shruti, you've caught me out here because I've lost the art of. It's been a while since I've really read books. I used to read a lot of books, and I've lost that art. I need to get back into that space, because today reading is not just about reading books. You also get a lot of content
Yeah.
and knowledge and gather information from many other areas. I think you know what there was a book that inspired me long back. I'll talk about that. It's called Wisdom from a Young CEO. Okay, I think it's from Douglas Barry. I'm not too sure. I need to jog my memory. I will share that with you. But
For
it is
sure.
about this young child who ends up writing letters to the top CEOs of the world. Okay, he just writes letters to the top CEOs of the world saying, "What should I do to become a CEO?" And surprisingly, they started responding to him. So this
Wow.
collection of letters responded by CEOs of the world telling this little kid, I think the kid was hardly 12 or 15, and telling this little kid what he should do to become a CEO. And that cuts across many elements. It has elements of emotion, it has elements of EQ, elements of management practices, elements of discipline, diligence, a lot of things. I think that was exciting because it one went as a question from a child, and the responses were being absorbed by a child, and it made an impact.
Yeah. Just while talking, I had one more question. I mean, not so there are a lot of companies, there are a lot of tech companies, there are a lot of ed tech companies, there are a lot of organizations who are trying to build some kind of an ecosystem in the education arena altogether. And somehow, obviously, there are people who are being missed also. Like you said, there are a lot of underprivileged kids that are not being given education. There are a lot more than that, right? Healthcare is not being given, reaching to the that area of our country and all of that. Do you think there could be something that could bring together all of these people who are doing something in the private sector but could also do in the public ones as well? So for example, a school is in the private settings, could also help and is helping, and then there could be a healthcare company, there could be a tech company who could also help in building this kind of a format.
No, I think to be fair, I think a lot has started to being get done by the government. I think there is
Of
a lot of
course.
initiatives that the government is starting to do now, and it has started to have platforms to attract private players now to work closely with the government and to try and contribute to building the social sector, so to speak. Uh, so to that extent, I don't think one needs to do anything specific, but I think one probably what is required is some form of a platform, a national platform that is starting to give a kind of an update and an assessment of what really is happening. For example, out of the 1.5 million schools, how many schools have been digitized? How many schools have actually got infrastructure? What is missing? There is a platform which I'm again unable to get the name. And I'm sorry, I'm just off my head. But this is a platform that talks about what is missing in schools and what volunteers can do to help fix that missing link. But
Wow.
not too many know about it. I mean, look at me. When I kind of just went off my radar for the moment. But I will share that with you. But
For sure.
so I think what is important is a larger coverage of news in this area.
Yeah.
I think you need to have sections of your news coverage actually talking about what are the improvements happening in the space, in the education space, and what can one do to help. Like you sometime back you said, what if a private preschool wants to help your neighborhood, uh, you know, uh, laborer's child, what should he or she
Yeah.
do? I think we should have more programs which talk about these. I
Yeah.
think I think knowledge is a little constricted. It's a little less. If you look at education as a sector, it's one of the largest sectors, but it's so fragmented and it is so broken down and it's so siloed that one doesn't really know where to approach and where to start. And that
Yeah.
is what needs to be uh, kind of rejigged in a way.
Yeah. Okay. And last but not the least, for the final one, what would be one advice for our viewers that you some mantra that has kept you going and you'd like to share with us?
No, is it a general mantra or a mantra for
Something
towards
that
a
is anything that's something that was very inspiring for you and is inspiring for you and it has helped you through any phases of your life. Anything that you think our
I
viewers could benefit
I
from.
think I think my first of all, let me tell you the your viewers, as their generation is changing by the day, I think they'll end up teaching me more than I kind of give them inputs. There's already a huge amount of learning that a lot of these youngsters have today. Having said that, I think the key word is learning. I think stay always hungry for learning more. There's nothing for me whenever I meet anyone or if I talk to anyone, if I interact with anybody, the first reaction in my own, let's say, subconscious is what can I pick up from this person more than what
Yeah.
can I give this person. And I think the minute you go through that thought process, you will start realizing that everybody you meet, right from a toddler to an elder, is a teacher of some kind in some
Mhm.
form. And I think that will suddenly make you realize that there's so much in this world that is still left to be learned, and that probably will keep you going, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Thank you so much for your time. I know it was very, very packed, but thank you so much for your time. And it has been a really interesting conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shruti, and thank you for all your very, very well pointed queries.
Thank you.